I used to get calls all the time from people asking me about the station. What kind of music do you play? And the canned format was adult album alternative. And so I asked the music director, what does that actually mean? And he said, we play the good stuff. That was the end of his explanation.
Well, AAA music is heavy on the singer-songwriters and the Americana, but we also include blues music, jazz, other styles like world music.
It's not the same songs every other hour. And in 90.5's case, it's not even the same songs each week.
WCB is pretty unique with all the variety of music that we can play and the variety of shows that we have.
We've had John Prine, Ziggy Marley, Warren Haynes from the Allman Brothers. We have had Tedeschi Trucks. The list goes on and on.
The thing that we have at WCBE is experts in music that know where the good stuff is.
Homemade, locally produced programming is what we're all about, and just sort of sitting there and grooving out in a radio station, knowing that I'm doing the same thing with thousands of listeners across the state. I really dig that. I dig that sort of concept.
We're all over the map. It's great music. You know, people that go, oh, I listen to everything. If you listen to everything, all you need to do is listen to us.
Okay, well, come on now. We have to incentivize. Yep.
All right, we got a hot mic. We don't need that right now. But testing,
Check one,
testing.
check two. Mine.
I hope he doesn't have us on at this point.
Still want to give it a little more time.
Yeah, yeah.
Dun, 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 dun. Tommy Emmanuel, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Maggie.
And Accomplice 2 is out now. You didn't think you could top the other Accomplice
I
album,
tried.
but it's pretty special as well. But we're
Thank
thrilled
you.
to have you here today. And
Thank you.
We've got a lot to talk about, where it all started, this latest album, the show tonight with Jorma Kaukonen,
Yeah, indeed.
who we adore as well.
Yeah.
The show's tonight at 8, and we'll have a pair of tickets to give away for the event tonight. Details at kappa.com. It's also listed on our Facebook events. Tommy, what are you going to start us off with?
I thought I might play one of the tracks from the new album, and this is a song that I wrote as a dedication to Merle Travis's son, Tom Bresh, who passed away last year. He was quite a cannonball. That guy. He was a comet flying through our lives, like Travis was, I guess. So I tried to write this tune, and it kind of with it.
Good evening and welcome to this afternoon. Today is Monday. Excuse me, Lord have mercy. Today is Thursday. My brain, I came back from overseas and I've lost my timing. Today is May the 8th, Thursday. Welcome to today's Academic and Facility Alignment Committee. We have a pretty active agenda today, and what we're going to do is call the roll first. Carl?
Mr. Cole?
Present.
Ms. Adair?
Present.
Ms. Turner?
Present.
Mr. Robinson?
Present.
We do not have a quorum, so what we'll do when we do get to that quorum number, we'll go ahead and approve the agenda as well as other business. But with that, what we can do is, let me give just a couple of updates. We had an awesome event yesterday, a town hall discussion about fair school funding. We had the opportunity to invite our state legislators, Senator Herschel Craig. We had the opportunity to have Representative Latina Humphreys, Representative Dontavius Geralds. We had Representative Brown Pickle Antonio Barrow. So we had a number of folks at the table to have a rich discussion, a robust discussion about what the state and condition are of things at the State House that are impacting our inability to secure the funding that we know our students need. And albeit they've touted big numbers, right? They've said, a couple $1 billion in investment. We're giving $555 million towards education, but we're seeing where the fine print is actually working towards that in terms of directing it to certain enclaves of students that may not necessarily be in need of these types of resources. Voucher students, for example. Now, we know that, unfortunately, there are more families that have the ability to afford private school for their children who are using vouchers than students who don't, students who actually need that. We're also seeing tremendous cuts coming possibly from the federal level as well. So I don't know that it was mentioned, I think it was mentioned yesterday by Treasurer Cook, that we're looking at $128 million just from the state alone. And it actually is a little bigger than that. But minimum, we're looking at $128 million in cuts. We're looking at another $160 million or something to that effect from the federal government. So we're looking around the area of at or over $300 million, very possibly, in cuts to some of the most sensitive areas that we need these dollars. So I'm encouraging folks who are watching this community, this committee this evening, to reach out to your legislators, become informed, engage your friends and neighbors, get on your phones and your social media and talk about how this is a negative impact on our Columbus City schools. Let's talk about how this is undermining, quite honestly, the efforts that were made by this district and the commitment made by this community to say that we want to invest in our children. But the state has actually created this environment and this space through its funding model, because it's not the fair school funding model at this point as proposed to the Senate. It actually takes away the impact of those permanent improvement and operating levy dollars for our children. We're seeing tremendous negative adverse impact, and we need to stand firm on the fact that students in Columbus City schools and all over Ohio in public school deserve and should get fair funding. So where can we find that? I believe you can go to YouTube and actually watch the forum on YouTube. If you type in Columbus City Schools, I imagine if you type in fair school funding, you'll be able to find that on YouTube. So with that, we do have one of our members available. He's doing his dad thing, but at least he's here. Glad to see you this evening. So now we do have a quorum. With that in mind, we have on, let's stand for the pledge if we can. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. All right. Our agenda tonight includes 3 presentations, one from CASA K-12 and 2 that are dealing with everything from our, Lord have mercy, I'm going too fast, our ESL, as well as our behavior side. So I'm excited to see what's coming forth with that. And is there a motion to approve our agenda?
So moved.
Moved, and is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Can we call the roll?
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Dare?
Yes.
Mr. Bean? Yes. Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Okay, we'll also ask for a motion to approve the minutes. Has everybody had the opportunity to see the minutes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the February 3rd and March 13th minutes.
All right, motioned, and is there a second?
Second.
All right, moved and seconded. Let's call the roll.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Mr. Dare?
Yes.
Mr. Bean? Yes. Ms. Turner?
Yes.
Mr. Robinson?
Yes.
All right, motion passes. Okay, moving on to committee operations here. Our first guest is Mr. Adrian Bond, who is with a strategic communications firm called CASA Public Strategy LLC, or CASA K-12. This firm specializes in stakeholder engagement, public messaging, and community outreach service that directly supports the goals of Columbus City Schools, Academic and Facilities Alignment Committee. Their expertise in engagement is particularly relevant as the district works to realign resources, enhance student recruitment, and strengthen community trust throughout the realignment process. Welcome, Mr. Bond. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. I appreciate you all having me. Again, Mr. Cole and I have met at various conferences around the country. We are the nation's leading student recruitment provider. And so when I hear Mr. Cole talking about a $300 million deficit, far too often I'm hearing this across the nation. We're in 27 states. Miami-Dade, third largest district in the nation, is our client. And they've got the same kind of problem, as well as Ecorse, which is a district right outside of Detroit, with about 1,200 students. So you're talking about between 1,200 students and 400,000 students districts across the nation are facing these challenges. So today I want to talk about student stabilization and how we're working with districts to combat those kind of problems. So often districts are faced with challenges that are beyond your control. You don't get a chance to have as much of a say-so at the state level as you may like when it comes to funding school districts. Often it feels like they're creating ways to take money from you all instead of trying to figure out ways to help fund you guys. And so, and then we talk about it at the federal level. You know, it's happening there, and the potential ramifications, you know, are going to be very impactful. And so, what we're here proposing is districts take those things that are in their control. And when we talk about student stabilization, that is something that the district has an opportunity to control. It is about going out, especially in the time of school choice. We believe in school choice. We only represent traditional public schools, but we also believe that traditional public schools offer the best educational option for most students, meaning you should have the right to compete as well. So when we talk about our private schools and our charters and our home schools, we feel and we defend the fabric of our traditional public education. So today I'm going to share some strategies that we're utilizing around the nation to address those problems. Am I controlling it this? If not, okay, yeah, it's moving. Okay. I'd like to be able to give a quick background on ourselves. You say, well, how do you even get involved in this kind of work? Well, we have our roots running political and issue campaigns, referendums. And so when we talk about engagement and grassroots efforts, that's part of what we do. Often you all know a lot of that as well, especially during political season. Well, back in 2016, we were approached by a district, by Shelby County Schools. They had lost 30,000 students in 4 years. And the superintendent at the time wanted to compete. He said, look, Adrian, we do not have the capacity to go out there and find all these families and tell them about the programs that they have left to go and choose elsewhere. So we ran a pilot program, and it was new. First year, we recruited over 1,100 students back to the district using those same methodologies that we would employ running political and issue campaigns. The next year, just to make sure it wasn't a fluke or an accident, we recruited back 1,300 students. So in the course of 2 years, we brought back 2,400 of the 30,000 students. And we quickly said, well, is this only happening here in Memphis? Can't be. And so we quickly found out that it's happening across the board. Fast forward to today, as I mentioned, we're in 27 states. And our opportunity here that we're going to be talking about, the student stabilization, it starts with 3 core areas: student recruitment, making sure that families know, and this is on page 6 of your document that you have sitting in front of you. Student recruitment, that is where we're going to go out and engage with families that aren't attending your school district. We'll go and talk to kids that are in all these other educational options, some that have left the district, some that might have bypassed your feeder pattern altogether. Second, we want to talk about the chronic absenteeism problems that districts are facing. You know, anytime that your funding is tied to a certain type of mechanism on the number of students that are showing up each day, it is important to make sure that you have some solutions around that. And thirdly, when we talk about student retention, I think it's okay for us to go and recruit in the front door, but if they're leaving out the back door, you're not sustaining that level. So when we talk about sustainability, I think those are those things that are really important. You'll notice some of our additional services that all play in part in trying to stabilize enrollment. You see Secret Shopper. That's where we come in, and we're going to act like parents that are interested and new to the district and see how your front desk workers are. Let's see how engaging your staff is when we come on site, because it's very important to understand that from the moment that a family that's interested in giving your school, that sake of, hey, I want to go there, give them consideration. From the time that they pick up the phone and call and ask questions to the time they get on campus, it's very important that they're putting their best foot forward on great customer service. And then that professional development, which goes around to support what we learn in our secret shopping. I think that's very important. So when we talk about student recruitment, I think the best thing about it, I always like to start off with is we have a no-risk guarantee, meaning that when we work with districts only pay us for those students that we bring to the district. So the first thing that a district would do is provide us 3 years worth of withdrawal data. We want to go and engage with all of those students that have left that are eligible to return. And then we want to buy a list of school-age families that are in the area that are families, and we're going to engage with those families. The good thing is we're going to talk to a number of families that have never, entered your feeder patterns. Bad thing is we're going to talk to a number of your current families. But we just thank them and then we go on. What we do is we'll start recruiting on our own dime, meaning that we believe in this service so well that we agree upon a per pupil fee, and whatever those students that register, show up to school, and stay through that required period of time, that's how we get credit and compensated. If they fall out at any point, we do not get compensated. So we put our objectives on the same side of the table as you all. We know that the number of students that are attending daily, that's a big indicator of how much funding that you have. And so this gives the district an ability to be able to utilize our services without taking on that risk. When you talk about, well, how do you do it? Well, we're going to make phone calls. We're going to, send text messages. We're going to send emails. We'll run digital ads. We'll go door to door. We'll go to events. We want to go to those places where we know that school-age families are considering their educational option for their kids. And as I mentioned, one of the things that we're doing in our engagement is we are highlighting those wonderful programs and innovative things that the district is doing. I think what is slightly different than what most districts do that we utilize is we're going to create brag sheets in conjunction with the schools, with the district, on individual schools. So if I'm engaging with a parent of a second grader, they might not be concerned that the high school right across the street just put out 30 merit semifinalists. They want to know that their second grader is getting the best educational option that there is and being safe. So what we're doing is we are laser focused on our intentional efforts on giving those families those points that we know that families are looking at when they're considering schools. And we do know that for the most part, our traditional public schools have a lot of great things going on, and oftentimes a lot of the families just are not aware of it. I mean, I see it in my city all the time. It's like, we do a lot of business with Memphis Shelby County Schools, and I'm always hearing about different initiatives that have been out for 2 or 3 years, and I've never heard about it. And so it's important in order to communicate that effectively with those one-on-one when we're engaging with families. When you talk about all those different kind of recruitment strategies you'll see here, I think one of the things that's, I'm not going to give away our secret sauce, but I think one of the things that sets us apart is we have the ability to really provide capacity. We start calling at 8:30 in the morning. We'll recruit to about 8 o'clock at night. We go in the evening times knocking on doors. We make phone calls on Saturdays and Sundays. 60% of our successful attempts happen between the hours of 5 and 8 during the week and on Saturdays and Sundays. And so our singular sole mission is to go out there and engage with as many families as possible. So that's very important from the student recruitment aspect. When we talk about some of the benefits of what we do, I'd be remiss just to show you what some of the work that it entails. Here's an example on page 18 where we recruited 398 students for a district. We made nearly 200,000, sent out nearly 200,000 emails, almost 125,000 phone calls, 22,000 texts. So as you see, this is a very cumbersome undertaking that we take on. And again, we take this on without incurring any liability to the district to start this. And so, as I mentioned, we're very confident in our ability to deliver, that we stand behind this. And again, knock on wood, throughout 27 states, we have not had a district that we have not shown a positive return on. And so I think the numbers speak for themselves. When we talk about the benefits of our proven process, we understand that being stewards of financial taxpayer dollars, is very important and paramount. Well, for every dollar that is spent in this service, the district is getting a return, because it's coming in terms of students. And so if those students drop out at any given point prior to them staying and fulfilling that requirement, well, we don't get compensated. So it puts our alignments on the same side of the table. Here's an example when we talk about ROI with a district that had a 9 times return on investment. By recruiting over 500 students, they have almost made nearly $6 million in bottom line revenue for the district by just having those 500 students. One of the things I want to talk about real quick on the chronic absenteeism, I think it's very important to understand the why these students and families are having issues showing up to school. And so when districts are faced with this dilemma, we feel that it's a 3-pronged approach. We need to find out the why, what's happening. We need to find out, are there district resources or agency resources that are available to help these families to get in school. And 3, which is probably the hardest part, which ties very similar into what we're doing on the recruitment side, and that's a heavy dose of communication. That's a lot of live phone calls. That's calling multiple times in the day. That's calling even when those students start showing up a little bit more. And so we want to make sure that they don't fall back into their previous ways and missing school. So I think that is important. We run it the same way as a student recruitment. Again, phone calls, texts, emails, in-person visits when necessary. When we talk about retention, I think the most important piece here is a retention campaign where we're going to proactively engage with these families and ensure that they are returning in the fall. That campaign typically starts in February and goes through about June, July. And what we're trying to aim is to find out, can we get families to commit to returning? In those events where families are not willing to commit, it gives us opportunity to address whatever their issues or concerns are. And so it's a lot easier from our standpoint to keep a family in a seat than it is for us to go out and recruit them once we left. So running those kind of preemptive campaigns is very important, running in conjunction with a student recruitment. So that's all that I have. I want to open it up, if you all had any questions on Mr. Cole. I just wanted to thank you for this moment.
Thank you, President Bond. So I want to open the floor to questions here. Let's start. Anyone? All right, I do have a few. I do appreciate the fact that you all, are really about the retention of the student in that most lengthy way and impacting. How do you guys galvanize the local support to be able to engage communities? You're in 27 different states. How do you galvanize local people to engage those local communities?
Yeah. That's a great question. It's important from our perspective to make sure that when we, and this is in one of the pages, when we hire for our grassroots effort campaign, it's very important to hire locals, because locals understand the lay of the land, they understand the flavor of the community. And so what we do is we have team members that will come from our operations office, and then we'll make the hires and we integrate them with our team. And so as we're going out, working events, going door to door, we want to find people that are passionate about the community. Oftentimes they can be anyone from college students to recent college grads to former retired teachers. So you name it. Former, we get a lot of people from the PTA, people that are very passionate about making sure that they understand the importance of this endeavor. And so, to your point, it is important for us to be able to make those connections. And I say from our standpoint, we have a very talented recruitment team that makes those overtures when we come into new areas. But that is very beneficial and important to the success of any campaign.
I thank you for that. On page 20, you highlighted the return on investments, the ROI, in terms of, and I want to elaborate on the idea that here in Ohio, and particularly with any school district here, but definitely Columbus City Schools, I started as a board member here with 52,000 students. We now have 47,000. At one point in time, we had 45, but we gained 2,000 back. We're hoping to try and increase our enrollment. As I understand it today, we have the capacity to educate as many as 60,000 students right now. With that in mind, how would you work alongside a district in helping grow capacity and helping even that district understand with greater depth the benefit? Do you work with the Treasury at all? Are there other parts of the school district that you work with that help them understand the fiscal impact of student enrollment?
Yeah, no, I can tell you, we've got a large district down in Texas, and to answer your question, you know, some of our longest standing relationships have come from the form of the CFOs, because they get it. They understand the impact to the bottom line with these students. And so sometimes that's some of our largest champions. One of the things that we do when we first undertake any endeavor like this is we want to sit with the district and find out what they're currently doing. We're not here to replace anyone. We're here to augment. We understand that district staffs are pulled and stretched, and what we do is we come in and provide the capacity. We want to find out what you're doing, what are some of the areas that we can provide the capacity in our reach and expertise, and go out. Oftentimes there's certain pockets of the communities that are losing students at a little bit faster clip than other areas. So we want to understand the why in that. Then we want to find out where those students are going. So it is a very in-depth onboarding analysis. We just don't come in and hit the ground. All of our communications have to be approved by the district. So we're going to work in tandem with your communications to make sure that everything that we're saying, we're singing off the same sheet of the music as you all. Our phone scripts, our texts, our emails, everything that's forward-facing to the parents, you all will approve. So the enrollment team, we've got to make sure that as we are getting families registered, that the enrollment team is letting us know the status of these families. So if we've got some that have registered in June, the district is knowing what our activity level is in July and August and so forth. If it was a perfect world, I'd like to start recruiting in October, November of the following year, because we do know that your competition is, they're holding open houses in October and November, and we'd like to be at that same level when parents are making those educated decisions where they're sending their kids. And we want to make sure that they're considering the traditional public school that's in the area at that decision-making point.
All right. And then student data. I know that this is a big issue. FERPA and all the things that protect student information. How do you all deal with that? How do you work with school districts in that space?
Yeah. We have, all of our districts, have assigned data privacy agreements. I mean, very exhaustive. We have to carry a lot of liability insurance. The good thing about us is we do not outsource any of our information. When we communicate with the district, we have FTP portals where they'll load the data onto secure portals. We do the same. We can communicate that way so that we don't have to worry or limit the amount of breaches that can happen in those situations. Data privacy is at the utmost of our responsibility and at the forefront of everything that we do. And we understand that it's sensitive information and we have to protect it. And so we go through great lengths to make sure we protect that information.
Oh, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Are there any questions? Yes, Dr. Robinson.
Mr. Bond, thank you for your presentation. It's very impressive that you only get paid for the students that you recruit.
That's right.
I would think any district would want that.
I agree with you.
Yeah. Thank you for mentioning parents. Sometimes we talk about families, stakeholders, participants. When we're not going to recruit a third grader, we're going to recruit their parents.
That's right.
And with that in mind, you mentioned the term community trust. I find that this district has low trust in the community. Principals, board, teachers, they don't trust me. How do we build up trust?
Oh, that is a loaded question, but I can tell you that I think in an environment in which there's a lot of competition, some of that mistrust just didn't happen overnight. So the same way it didn't happen overnight, well, that's an area that we're not going to change overnight. But I can tell you when we're engaging with these families one-on-one, and they know that, hey, we're calling on behalf of the district, and we're making an effort to bring you back to the district. Most parents like that feeling. It's the reason why sometimes when your competition comes calling, they're sending information. They're saying, look, I want your Johnny. He would be a great addition here to the school. As a parent, you start feeling proud about a school wanting your child. And so as you're having those conversations, as we're engaging with families and finding out, why did you leave the district? You know, oftentimes I can tell you that when parents leave, it's not necessarily an indictment against the district. It may be an issue that happened at the front desk, could be a teacher, it could be a principal. It could be something that happened that they did not feel like they were heard, and so they leave. Oftentimes when we get to the root of it, 30–40% of the chances are that it's not anything that would be prohibitive to come back. So as we're having these one-on-one conversations, we get a chance to let the district know, hey, your child is at this school, but this school doesn't have fine arts. I thought you mentioned that your child wanted to be in dance. Well, do you know at this school here that they would be going to, or that they left, has an excellent dance program? Yeah, I forgot about that. My daughter's been asking about it. Okay, so when we're making these asks, we're breaking down these barriers. So I think when we talk about sending, and we do it, you know, we can do social media, we can do billboards, but at the heart of it is having these one-on-one conversations. That's very important, and that's oftentimes how you break down those barriers, and you can really find out the why. And I think that will go a long way in earning that trust back in communities.
Well, Mr. Bond, that's very impressive, particularly that individualized recruitment of families. If Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter was the answer, we would already have the trust.
That's right.
We would be at the top.
That's right.
That doesn't get it done.
That's right. Yeah, and I can tell you, you know, one of the things my CEO, Brian Stevens, always mentions is in his speeches is, why do people give to charity organizations? You walk into a store, somebody's there, they're trying to raise money. You gave money because they asked. And so it's important to make that ask. So as we're talking about targeting families, we're making that ask. We're finding out those reasons why, but we're making that ask to come back or come for the very first time. Mm-hmm. We recruit a lot of families from private schools that had no idea all the wonderful things that are going on at these schools. And they get there and they're shocked and amazed because in their mind, they were thinking that, hey, this is, the kids are running wild, there's no discipline, there's all of these things that are in their head. And then they come and find out and see that it's not that. And so we do a lot of disarming of misinformation.
I appreciate that information, particularly around the idea that there seems to be some aspect, and I'm asking more than I'm asserting, but there seems to be some aspect of asset mapping, particularly with curriculum, with extracurricular activities, things to that effect. You work with school districts to actually help them identify where those assets are to then be able to share that with the community. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I can tell you that most of the districts do not have what we call one-pagers or brag sheets. Every school that's in a district is unique in its own right. And it's something that they're going to be special about, that they're doing differently than any other school in the district. And so having those brag points, I don't care if it's maybe having an award-winning principal at the helm, or having some innovative STEM program, or having some, even some of those things is having some different type of aftercare programs and activities. Those things matter. And so what we want to do is make sure that we have that information. So in the event that a district doesn't have that information, which oftentimes most districts do not, we'll work in conjunction with the communication department to make sure that we are getting that, because that is very important. As we're talking about, Mr. Robinson mentioned about recruiting the parent. That is very important because we're matching those assets to those things that those families said the reason why they left, or the reason why they've never attended the district in the first place. So it's very important to have that that mapping done, so that when we're having those in-depth conversations, we're leading parents to the right place.
I thank you. I thank you. If there aren't any additional questions,
Hey,
go ahead.
Question.
Yes, Madam Vice President.
Looking at your return on investment examples, I just had a couple questions about what we're looking at here. So, ones that don't say multi-year, that engagement with the district was, I assume, just 1 year.
Yes, it could. We do a lot of pilot programs, and so we'll do a pilot program to be able to come in and see, and then sometimes we have that handoff because some of the districts might have individuals already at the district that should be doing that, and so oftentimes either a pilot program or a sustainability opportunity that we get it kick-started, and then we hand them off.
In looking at Detroit public schools, it says a number and then it says cap reached.
Yes, so that's a very interesting observation. A lot of our districts will cap us for budgetary reasons. So they'll say, hey, we want, to Mr. Copeland, we want 18,000 students. We just can't take 18,000, we can't pay you off for 18,000 students next year. So what we can do is say, hey, we're gonna cap you. You can recruit up to and not to exceed more than 500 students at this price. So it allows the district to have some kind of planning for what we're doing and the payment on the other side. The good thing is, as I mentioned, is the district doesn't pay for anything up front. It all's on the back end. So, but from a budgetary standpoint, a lot of districts want to know, hey, this is the most that we're going to pay in the event that you all are very successful and we hit this amount.
Are there certain grades that you find most success in when we're looking at these numbers? Like, are they like more entry points, so like at the beginning of a grade band or kindergarten? Are there kind of targets that you find most success in where families are willing to move?
Well, I can tell you, you hit on a couple of other ones. I may need to take you on the road when we're going out to these conferences. Oftentimes, your competition targets kindergartners. Why do they target kindergartners? Because your competition understands that most school districts think these kindergartners are going to automatically show and come anyway. So they don't put a lot of effort in attracting those kindergartners. Whereas I know for a fact, your competition in a lot of areas understand if I can get them at the kindergarten level, I get a chance to keep them through the next transition period. And so, which brings us to the next point, the transition periods where parents have to make decisions. That's where your competition really comes out and try to make the case, because they know you've got to make a decision. So at any point where you're trying to make a decision, I'd say across the board is probably the easiest for your competition to attack you. But then in some districts we see that at elementary, the schools are just fine. But when they start getting to middle school, that's when the competition really goes after them and they start leaving. And so we understand that in a lot of districts, the high schools do a little bit better because they have more resources than a lot of times the competition. So in some districts, the high school isn't as bad as a problem as at the elementary or middle school. So every district is unique in its own right.
Last question. The schools on your return on investment examples who are showing multi-year, I assume those are not schools that are in the pilot. I'm wondering, what's the average multi-year engagement kind of look like with your organization?
So what we like to be able to do outside of a pilot program, we like to be able to do a minimum of 2 years. That gives us 2 recruitment cycles. And we just ended our longest one, which we've been with a district for 6 years. They put out an RFP. Hopefully we feel pretty good that we should be able to get it and renew it. That's going to be announced next week. be for another 5 years. But they're in Texas where the competition is very fierce, very similar to here. I say the 3 states that probably have the most fiercest is Florida, Texas, and Ohio. And so those places like that, I mean, it's very important that, hey, we can recruit them 1 year, but if you're not sustaining this for the next year, you may get them in and your competition isn't stopping. So we look at this as pretty much a cornerstone of what it takes to compete in today's environment. I think, unfortunately, those days of old where the traditional public school can just open up its doors and all the kids come running in, those days are over. And so we've got to make sure that we're doing our part to let families know that traditional public schools still is the best option in our areas.
Excuse me, Matt, just one question.
Yes, please, Mr. Singh.
How have you found the recruitment or the engagement with the English learners and the families of the English learners?
Yes, that is very key. Internally, we cover about 6 different languages. We work in a lot of urban districts, but we work with districts like in Denver where we have to cover 23 languages. And so one of the things that I find it to be very interesting is when you can work in those communities, when you start talking about building trust, once they trust you, it's funny how they'll start telling their other friends and neighbors and church members, hey, you need to consider going here. And that's what your competition is doing a very good job. They will penetrate those areas and they start building up trust. And you look up and large segments of those populations are at your, at your competition instead of where you are. So it's very paramount that we are reflective of the communities that we serve. And I think it's very important from a district standpoint to understand that, hey, we must do our best to make sure that they trust us and that they know that we want them and their kids in school. So, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Bond, if you can give just an example of a success in that space and even SPED.
Yeah.
Even our special education
Yeah,
students.
okay. So in Miami, Miami-Dade, they have a community that's heavy Creole, and it was a competition school. I won't say the name, but they're very aggressive at targeting their families. And they had probably pulled out about 250 to 300 students over a 2-year period of time, to the point that the school went from being at near capacity to probably having about a 20, 25, it was elementary school having capacity. Well, then as we started engaging with these families, the information that was being told to these families was just wrong. I mean, it was a lot of misinformation. And that's the downside of not telling your story to individuals, because you're relying on someone else telling your story, regardless if it's right or wrong. And so what we were able to do is we were able to neutralize that. We never attack competition at all, but what we're here to do is make sure that they're armed with the correct information. In this particular instance, families were led to believe that the school that their kids were leaving out of was a failing school, where actuality, the school they were going to was a failing school compared to the district school, but the families didn't know where to go and find that information on the state website, so they were just relying on the competition, to be honest, and unfortunately at that point they weren't. And so we were able to level set that, and we brought back nearly almost half of those families in that first year back when we started engaging. And when you talk about SPAD, I think it's very important to understand that when I say that the traditional public school offers the best educational option for most people, is because of those kind of situations, because you all have the resources dedicated. I can't tell you the number of times that when we go and we'll recruit from various places where kids that have IEP programs, they're not being fulfilled. They're not being addressed at all. In some states that they're receiving these scholarship or vouchers, these families are unknowingly going to these schools where they don't even have the resources to address their kids' IEP programs. And so unknowingly, they're in some states now are trying to make them sign waivers to acknowledge that, hey, You take your kid out of here, you're going to a school that doesn't, they're just telling you they don't have the resources to address it. So it's going to be left back upon you to try to find those corrective actions. So it's important that when we're talking to families that they understand, and that is very important in our recruitment, is that they understand that, hey, you've got the resources here. They're not going anywhere. They're not going to have an exit interview with you 2 months into your school and telling you got to go somewhere else. You know, oftentimes we see those horror stories. And so it is very important that parents understand that. So those are some isolated situations that we've seen in our recruitment process.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bond.
Thank you.
If you want to give just a couple of seconds of closing comment,
Yes.
well, thank you for being here.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. You know, again, I'd like to be able to continue the conversation. Oftentimes, the district won't know, well, what is it going to cost me? Well, we can get a scope of work and can detail all those kind of things out, and I'd like to be able to continue that. We know that we've done a lot of research on the school district, and we know that the school district has a lot to be proud of, has a lot of great things working, and we're excited about sharing those good things with families, because as we see across the nation, just because a lot of great things and innovative programs are going on doesn't mean that the families always know that it's there. So that's what our main objective is, and I appreciate the opportunity for coming and presenting, and you all have a good evening. Thank you.
You do the same. Thank you, sir. Safe travels.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to our second presentation, English Second Language, ESL.
Thank you. Thank you, President Cole, Vice President Adair, and committee members. Appreciate the time allowing me to speak with you tonight. They're going to control that. Just next slide. Should I get that? Or okay, thank you. He'll do it for me. All right. Yeah, there we go. Just tonight's agenda that we'll cover is just a few points, guiding principles and core value from our department, alignment of our board goals, ESL, some data information, future staffing recommendations, and some long-term strategies. Next slide. A few of our department, our guiding principles that we operate by in our ESL department is that we believe that all English learners are general education students first. ESL services provide rigorous Tier 1 instruction in language acquisition. All students should have a sense of belonging and acceptance and inspire and reinforce that their community and their school. Decision-making for all ESL services should be a team process at each building. That's inclusive of the teacher, family, and the student. Supplementary EL support, which can be inclusive of accommodations, modifications, and specifically designed instruction, can and should be provided in the general education classroom when appropriate. Next slide. What we believe in our department, one of our core value in our department is that we want to make sure that ESL is a support, not an intervention. Many times we get our English learners, our newcomers to the district, and many times they come here, they go through what we call a silent period. So what we can't do is that we can't misconstrue that silent period that you might see in a classroom for students actually needing an intervention. They just actually need some time to get settled, just like we would if we were to be settled in another country trying to learn a language itself. So we have to make sure that that's a part of a part of what we stress from the ESL department. Next slide. Alignment to our board goals. That's no different for English learners than it is for our general education students. All is the same. So we want to make sure that everybody understands that we feel the same way about our English learners no matter when they come in, that we want to strengthen the reading proficiency, math proficiency, and we also want to close opportunity gaps, which is a part of the report card that that our English learners are a part of. Next slide, next slide, yeah. Just a few of the ESL highlights that we're proud of, that we like to, of course, talk about anytime we can. Have 134 schools that have earned full 5 points toward gap closing over the last 3 years. We've provided from the ESL department 206 professional development sessions throughout the district. We've had 177 current and former ELs earn the seal of biliteracy. And actually, we have a graduation coming up next week, the 22nd, I do believe, of the current graduation students with seal of biliteracy. And I think that number is up as high as 67 at this point. Could be a little bit higher. And over the last 3 years, we've had over 2,000 students have scored proficient on the OELPA, which is the state exam or state assessment for English learners in our district. And over the last 3 years, our completion rate for the OELPA, which is the state assessment, is at 98% of rate of assessment completion, which means, of course, we have 4 parts of that assessment: reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And of our roughly 10,000 students, of course, we've hit 98% completion rate for those assessments for our students. So that's a really good job, because we come out, we really have to get to work on that, because one of the assessments, which is speaking, that's a one-on-one piece that our department supports to make sure that we hit that 98% completion rate. Next slide. Just some information for the prior 3 years on our partners, or that are what I like to say are kind of our competition, but our colleagues around the state. And as you can see, for the last 2 out of 3 years, we've hit the gap closing target, which is assigned by the state. And of course, this past year, and we're waiting on the results that will be out in the next couple of weeks for the 24-25 test that we just finished up. So we're quite proud of that. And what's really important to take a look at and see is that if you note the number of ELs taking that assessment, ours truly, it doubles pretty much all of our partners around the district. Now, you can see that over 5,000 number. You have to remember, even though we have about 10,000 students in our district, it's important to remember. You might say, well, where are the other 4,000? Well, the first year is a baseline score, so they don't count inside of this data. So the number that you see, that 55, 59, in let's say 21 or 22, and then of course the 58, 25, that does not include the students that are new, the newcomers that the first year, and then they won't count into the second year. So that's why that number is a little bit different. Our ESL service level by school sites, as you can see, very important here to take a look. We have 48 of our sites where we have an English language arts and a TESOL endorsed teacher that are teaching over 6,500 students. We have 10 what we call our full shelter sites, where we have ESL teacher in the core area, and of course an instructional assistant to go along with that. And then of course we have 2 newcomer programs: Columbus Global Academy for our high school 9 and 10, and of course World Language Middle School, which of course covers 6, 7, and 8. Those are our 2 newcomer programs that we currently have. Now, what's important to take a look at on this slide is that the non-ESL site, where no classes are taught by ESL endorsed teachers, those 54 and those 1,100 students, from the department standpoint, we pay close attention to that, and we have, of course, a coordinator that is assigned to every single region. But it's very important we stay focused, laser focused on those 1,100 students. But we have to remember is that since we don't have a teacher there, okay, we have to make sure that my coordinators are out there all the time. We're constantly checking in with those teachers and seeing what we can do to help. But we have to remember, at many of those sites, those students have been here and they are doing just fine. The families have immersed them in. They've either refused the services, or they just said, hey, immerse my student into the general education. For like example, like Cedarwood, we don't have an ESL program there. So that the students are there and we check in and out all the time with them, their students are doing just fine. So a lot of families, that's like 1,147 students. But we do have instances where inside that 1,147 is that some students are there because the families refuse services because they want to stay at their home school. Okay, so that's why the coordinators inside the department, we have to make sure that we check in constantly to make sure that those students and those teachers have the support that they need in order for those students to be successful also. Next slide, please. Just some data over the last 3 years and for our district. And as you can see, we're up to 10,659. Now, I did a presentation before and it says as of March 25th, but then I had the data ran, I got it in here in time. As of 5/5, because the numbers, they pretty much change daily with the newcomers that we have coming into the district. And so as you can see, what I want you to pay close attention to is that at the kinder and at the 9th grade level. At kinder, that number will always be upwards of 900 to 1,000 students that we receive annually every July 1st, because of course, our fantastic early childhood program will send students over from early childhood into kinder, okay? So we can count on 1,000 new students coming in immediately every year, every July 1st. And then also I want you to take a look at the 9th grade, where we see the 948, 1126, and 1207, where that number constantly grows. The reason that number jumps up a little bit there is because at the secondary level, when we have newcomers that come into the district, Many times if they come in without a transcript or any kind of record that they've had schooling before, then of course we start them at that 9th grade cohort in order to give them a chance in 4 years to graduate. So that's why that number looks a little bit different at the 9th grade level and for those 3 years. That's very important to see. But other than that, you can see the numbers are growing in every, K to 12 throughout the district, and that we're upwards of the 10,700, and we're probably pushing, it's 10,700 plus now, because of course we always have students that we haven't assessed yet at every location with the OLPS assessment, the screener that says whether or not they need ESL support, okay? So next slide, please. Just some ESL newcomers that you can see, the number that we've had since August of 2024. And you can see at the kinder, there's that 1297. That's that automatic rollover that we'll get. And then, of course, we go through each year, and then you take a look at the 9th grade again, those newcomers that'll come in. And if you take a look at the ND, the last number over there, that 90, those are students that come through central enrollment, and their transcripts or whatnot maybe are not evaluated yet, or they don't have it, or that we're waiting on something. So that 90 number could will include those students, okay? But then what happens is that we finally get enough information, well, hey, we're not gonna get any more transcripts, or, the transcripts don't relate to what we need to do to have a passing course here and get credit, then we revert them back to 9th grade. That's why that number is 574, and that's what usually happens at that ND number. And you can see the newcomers is 3708 that we've had up, and that's up until May 5th, and we still have students coming in daily. Next slide. Just a quick slide on our regions and how our numbers shake out, which, as you can see, our numbers are heavy in regions 1, 2, 4, and 5. And of course, the titles that you see there, needs ESL, interim, trial, mainstream, and exempt, refuse, and OLPS. The needs ESL, that number is actually the number that we get from our state assessment that says that the students in the 4 assessments, they score either 1 or 2 out of the 5 in that assessment. So that's how we determine that, like, hey, that's what they scored on the state exam. They need ESL, that most likely they need ESL services, okay? So in the interim column, that means that the students, not only did they might have a 1 or 2, but in the other domains, somewhere in the 4 domains, they've scored a 3 or 4, so not just 1s and 2s. So those are the students that are making progress. In the needs ESL column, those students will be what we call our emerging students. And then the students that are in that interim column, that'll be more of the students that are progressing. They're making progress within the classroom, whether it be with the ESL teacher or the general education teacher. And of course, the trial mainstream, those are students are just basically one step, probably one of the domains from being proficient. Okay, they're scoring 4s and 5s, and then it's somewhere along those 4 domains, they've gotten a 3 or maybe a 1 or a 2, but basically they're one step away from being proficient and out of ESL totally. And exempt are our students would be where we have students with IEPs and things like that that are exempt from different parts of the state assessment itself.
And then OLPS?
OLPS, yep, OLPS is the screener, like for the students that come through that our assessors that you'll see in the slide that's coming up, they haven't had a chance to get out and screen them. They're relatively new, but our assessors have to get out and screen them and see whether they either test out or they need ESL services. So that increases that number, that total number that you saw previously. So we have about 69 students, and our assessors usually get to them pretty fast, but not with the state, with the OSTs and things like that. Sometimes the students are absent. It takes our assessors a little bit of time to get to them. But they do a good job of doing that. As you can see by the number, which was 3,700, those students, were newcomers, had to be assessed. So our 6 assessors throughout the year had to have gotten to them to assess them to see that they needed services. And of course, I just put there for the teachers and IAs what we have in each region currently, where the teachers at those locations in Region 1, and Region 1 through 6, and the teachers and the IAs that we have that are supporting our students there. And as you can see, that's what we run into, a situation where Regions 1, 2, 4, and 5, our students are concentrated in one particular, in regions. So you can see, as you can see in Region 3 and Region 6, the numbers are not quite as high. That's our south side, and more of right there in the middle, right by off of Parsons, like a Siebert. Like in Region 3, Siebert would be the biggest school that we have there. And then Region 6, downtown, would include downtown high school, but they won't have as many as of course, as our other regions, 1, 2, 4, and 5. Next slide. Our ESL department and the support we provide. Currently, like I said, we have 8 coaches that we are assigned, and they are assigned to regions, and they're in the secondary level and at their elementary level. And we have to cross over because we only have 8. So I have a high school and an elementary coach, or what we call a coach or a coordinator, that's assigned to each region. And what the instructional coaches they're responsible for is to facilitate professional development, like we talked about, and then of course collaborate with administrators and classroom teachers to develop school-wide systems of support for ELs and provide job-embedded coaching for effective ESL strategies. The 6 assessors that we talked about, that their responsibility is to go out when we get newcomers that come through central enrollment and get to their school. They go out and make sure they assess those students to make sure or see if whether or not they would need the ESL services. So they administer that screener. They assist with the administering of the speaking domain when we have the state assessment. And then also they assist with administering the speaking domains at our MPSS schools, which we're responsible for that, supporting them there too. And as you can see, up until now, the 3,199 OELPs administered school year for 24-25, that's to date. So they come out smoking really hot, because when you start a year, we only have 30 days to get all of the screeners done. That's a state mandate that we have to done. And then after the 30-day period, we only have 15 days from the time they come through central enrollment to make sure that they've been assessed to see if they need services. So they hit the ground running. Central enrollment, we have 4 supports down there, and that's for day-to-day operations for students and families that come in that need to be assessed or fill out. What we do is that we also help them down there fill out the paperwork that they might need, that they might not be as versed. And so we have people down there for that in the particular languages to support that. And then our Language Assistance Center, which they stay busy constantly. We have 17 bilingual personnel serving 9 different languages, supports communication needs for parents and meetings, district events and discipline hearings and so on, and then district-wide school document translations. Those documentation translations, we're well over 300 documents, and of course, those are documents that come from, of course, central office and our schools also. So we get moving on that too, and because to ship that out just wouldn't be cost effective. So we've established the people inside of our department that will take care of that. And they do a great job at that. We're well over 300 documents now that we've translated for the district enrolling. Next slide. Just a quick, some data on the Language Assistance Center on the total calls that we received, and that's over 5,700. And I just got the new data today, but I just didn't have time to get it in there. That's over 61,000 now for total calls we've taken, and it's, of course, it's over 10,000 total meetings that we've attended. Now, the meetings, not only will our department take care of those meetings that, like for IEP meetings and such, we still have to ship some of those calls out, and we have 3 outside agencies that we worked with that will support us and help us with that, because there's no way our people can do the translations, interpretation, take the calls from the districts, from the schools, and then, of course, handle all of the meetings. But for the majority of that 9,400, and that's over 10,000, our folks inside the department takes care of those daily. So every one of the people in our department, they have a schedule that we align daily to support those IEP meetings and things like that as such. Next slide. Future ESL staffing recommendations, and we also, we all understand where we are funding-wise for the district and the things that we're up against, but there's just some recommendations of if no new allocations that we ever receive. What's going to be important for us is that we are able to relocate teachers and instructional assistants as needed based on those 4 regions, the 4 regions where the numbers are very high, because we're up against seat availability and the support in those particular buildings. Because if we want to have support at the home schools, we might need to think about it. If we're not going to be adding new allocations, we need to think about how we can use our assets internally now to make sure that we have the support we need in the different areas that we need it. Because many of our students now want to stay at their home school. They do. We get a lot of more students that want to refuse the services and stay at their home school, which I totally understand. And I think we understand that as a district too. But now the support that we have, let's say at a West High, at our full shelter sites or West High or Mifflin or places, we're running into situations where the teachers that are there, we need more teachers there to support those students if they're going to stay at their home school. And we take a look at that constantly on what we need to do. And I think with the resources that we have and taking a look at before the 211 rolls around, Ms. Moser has helped us with that before, big time, is that she's allowed us to take a look-see and move the teachers and the instructional assistants to where we need to move them to provide the support. We need to work with the resources that we have here now. We can't sit around and wait whether the state is going to do this or do that and take money away from us. We don't have that time to wait. We have to get the support to where we need it, and I think we can do that with what we have. Not saying that we wouldn't like more support, or more allocations, but let's just call it what it is and just deal with what we have. And then, of course, the minimum, but what's very important here is that we need to not only relocate our teachers and IAs as needed, but require PD for all of our CCS personnel. As an ESL staff, we provide those professional developments for our teachers, but what's important is that we have to get in front of our general education teachers. Okay, we started with our district PDs and things that we do now. We're a lot better than we used to be. We're on the right track where this past year we were in front of a lot of math and social studies that we did a lot of PD for the general education teachers, and next year we're going to change that over to the ELA and the science. But what's important is we have to be in front of our teachers so we can help our general education teachers and support them in the things that they need in order to provide the services for the English learners that they get in their classrooms, and say, how am I going to help these students? It has to be total collaboration between the ESL teachers, administration, and the general education teachers with professional development from us to make sure that they have what they need for our English learners. And of course, the ideal state is, realign our ESL classrooms there to serve students at their home school, because that's what we're up against now. Because like the gentleman said, we have a lot of families, they'll talk to each other. And say, wait a minute, I'm riding a bus across town to the newcomer program. Well, I want to go where he's going. He's right down the street. So they, like he said, our families they talk to each other. And we need to be cognizant of that and then jump out ahead of that and then make sure the support is at that home school for those students and those families. Next slide, I believe we're about, and just this is some long-term strategies. IA support for every school that has 15 plus ELs. And when we say the 15 plus ELs, once you hit that 15 number at a particular location, that's a state mandate where we start counting towards a report card. So that's why I said the 15 plus, make sure that we have an IA. There's some long-term strategies, other, classified support when we can for the Language Assistance Center and Central Enrollment, because they get inundated. And what we do normally now, what we do is that in the summer, we'll pay the extra service for some of our instructional assistants that are in the department to go down to help with Central Enrollment, because they get quite inundated down there, so we have to provide some extra support. Ability to reorganize our personnel throughout the school year is needed. Of course, that comes, we need to have our program in order and what we want to do and discuss with senior leadership about what we want to do before we hit the 211 process. And then, of course, require all PD for all CCS personnel, and that means all CCS personnel, transportation, bus drivers, anybody that we can get in front of to support and show them how to, or help them understand how to work with English learners.
Nice. Real quick question.
Yes.
The IA support, are these instructional assistants?
Yes, sir.
So these are classified?
Yes.
So you're asking for that additional support?
Yes.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's about it. Last slide, please. And then, of course, Myra, she couldn't make it tonight. She was a little bit under the weather, so just she and I, she makes me put that there, so. Yep, so, but we're busy and we appreciate it and appreciate all the support, so. Any questions?
So the floor is open for questions, and I know that this is going to be a rich conversation, so.
I do have, but we can.
I just have a couple comments. Mr. Singh, thank you for your professionalism and your enthusiasm for this topic. It comes across very authentically. I want to commend your office. I was at the Medina Kindergarten rally this past summer. Your staff was there. They were very professional. They were needed.
Yes.
And as that previous speaker spoke about retention, if your staff was not there, we would have missed out on many kindergartners.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Also, thank you for your work at Huey Elementary.
Yes.
I do a lot of work there, and your staff is always there.
Yes.
And so that's all I wanted to say is thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you for those trust-building statements. Yeah, Madam Vice President.
I'm wondering, I know that when you went through the slide for the service levels by school sites, and you kind of talked about those, I was wondering if you could kind of talk about them in the eyes of a student. So a student who is experiencing these classes, if you could kind of explain what it would look and feel like to them being in an ESL site versus a sheltered site versus in the newcomer program, or not. And you kind of talked a tiny bit about that, but if I'm a third grader in the district and I'm in these different places, what does it feel like and look like? What is my experience?
Thank you for that question, Vice President Adair. At the third grader, and what's helpful there is that at the elementary level, when we have, let's say, a first grader, second grader, third grader, of course they go through that period. But for me, I almost call that the catbird seat for us, because of course at that first, second, third grade level, they're learning so much of the same thing: the phonics, the vocabulary, and the elementary teachers are versed on doing that. And usually when you have first, second, or third graders, by the time they hit fourth or fifth grade, they're settled in, they understand, and they're doing just fine in the classroom.
I'm gonna make them seventh graders if it's harder.
Okay, yeah, because now when we get to that, that's gonna be then when we hit that secondary level, and especially when we get newcomers, that could be really a tough time. Because of course, they're sitting there, and of course, it's a difference in a student that's a true newcomer that's never been to school, and a student that's had schooling, whether it be in their country or another state. They're totally in that, what we call that silent period, and it's tough. It's very tough. And if you don't have that inclusion or that nurturing piece from the teachers, which 99% of the time, I know we do, that's a struggle. And it's even worse when we hit the ninth grade level, where you get a newcomer that'll come in, let's say at ninth grade, that's never been to school or very little schooling. That's really where we hit the bump in the road. And that's why it's very important for a student, because they'll sit there. I mean, can you just imagine us, let's say, go to another country, and then we are ninth grade or 10th grade, and then we plop us down in the middle of the classroom. I mean, how will we feel? See, so it's that same way. But then again, if many of our students, if they're in classrooms with peers of their own, and that includes American students too, because they take to each other, and where the most of the learning and the relaxation and the integration comes when they can just be together. If you go to a lunchroom, you can get a newcomer. Now, you watch that newcomer in a classroom, be totally silent, struggling maybe. But watch them at lunchtime, when they have a time to be with their students and their peers.
Socialize, yeah.
They'll start to ease in and integrate into what we want. But it's difficult, yes, ma'am. It's very difficult, and that's where sometimes we could very easily lose our students if we don't pay attention to what we need to do as administrators, as instructional assistants, as teachers, to help these students through that time period.
When we go to the next slide with the number of students that we've served, I just want to make sure that it's clear here, and I'm interpreting the chart right. So at one point in this presentation, you said, these students can actually not be EL students anymore. They test out, they don't need our services, they would be full general education students, right? So when we look at the total amount of students, which is at the bottom column for each year, in that year, are we counting every single touch of a student? Is the total number every student that year who was considered EL?
Yes.
Okay.
That final number is, yes.
And then, so for example, if we looked at the first column there, which is 22, 23, we go a couple years over to 24, 25, that might be a completely new set of kids, right? That 8,643, that might not be the same kids at all that's now in the 10,000, right?
You are correct.
So it's we are touching and working with a lot of kids and families every year it's completely different, which is a different way, I think, of thinking about sometimes when we look over year, we're like, oh, it's the same kids.
Yeah.
It could maybe not be the same kids.
Yes, you are totally right, and I can be more clear on that, and we're gonna fix that, because that 8,600 number, when you get to the 10,000 number, many of those 8,643, by the time they get to that third year, they've already tested out. You're right. So we have to be more clear on that, because it could be a whole new set of families and students that we're dealing with when it goes from year 22, 23 to 24, 25. You are correct. Be more clear on that.
Yeah, so just the amount
Yes.
of students and families in need that we have as you said, it continues to grow. And so I know in your strategies, you mentioned several of these, but I want to just kind of ask you as like best practice in this area, when we think about the academic program, and we think about how we're delivering that and supporting it, what are some best practices or promising practices that you think you've kind of seen in other districts? And then I'm going to also layer on top of that, because you've kind of touched on this about the design, about how we actually, where we do it. When we think about facility alignment, because that's part of this committee as well, what is it that when we think about buildings or having programs in buildings, or even having the different ability to have sites or programs in spaces, what are some things we should be considering?
I think what some of the things that we should be considering is that first, I think we need to make sure, it starts with making sure, let's say we have a building, that we have 1,200 students. I think it's imperative that we understand that if you have a building and we want to put 1,200 students in there, you don't have 800 general education students and 200 EL students. You have 1,000 students. So when I say that, that means that we can't anymore. We can't continue to say.
Mindset.
Yes, it's a mindset. The mindset has to change of, we have 900 students and all of our teachers are basically English learners or ESL teachers. Everybody has to be that way, and it's no more, well, they don't know it, we can just ship them to a newcomer program.
Right.
That has to stop. We just can't afford that anymore. We have to make sure that these students that want to stay in their home school will have the ability to stay there, and all the teachers understand that these are all of our students. And here's another thing that I think is very important, is that, and we've been working on this, the collaboration between the ESL teachers at the sites and the general education teachers has to be imperative, that it's mandatory that it happens. Because what happens, what we find is, sometimes we have ESL teachers that say, okay, these students are ready to move. Because it has to be a constant movement. We can't have them, even though it's an ESL teacher at a particular site, let's say in a high school, secondary level, and it's a social studies teacher there. Well, the plan is to get that student out of the social studies teacher's classroom, that's ESL, into the general education classroom, and have that continuous movement, because we constantly have students coming. And we can't anymore, that student, we can't have that student, I don't want that student to stay in that ESL classroom for social studies, science, or math all year. If we're doing what we're supposed to be doing, if the teachers are doing a great job teaching, if we're supporting like we should be supporting our coordinators from the department, those students I should have by semester at least, and we check on semester, who's moving in order to make room. So I think those are two of the most important things that we have to change on how we look at how this operation is going to work for us to continue to do what we do.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for that. Are there any additional questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the presentation tonight on our English learner students. I always come from a lens of equity. One question I do have for the committee and for our current board members here, has any thought gone into the renaming of ESL to ELL to really have a more comprehensive view of these students? A lot of these students are coming to Columbus City already knowing 3 to 4, sometimes 6 languages. I think it's really important to highlight that. These are incredibly intellectual students that we're receiving, and also receiving at a really, really high rate. As you know, DEI is under attack nationally, and I think as a #1 leading urban district in the state, I think we need to also showcase our appreciation for these students. Mr. Cole, thank you for highlighting. We have had influx of students, and I think it's important to highlight that so we can retain and attract more students.
Yes, ma'am.
Second, also, I'm from the west side of Columbus. The west side of Columbus has always been known to have a significant high population of Somali students. Even my family personally have attended Columbus City schools and are half West African, right? So they do not have the same last name as me. So the screening process sometimes for these students, I believe, could be tightened up a little bit. I'm so glad you mentioned how sometimes the support of ESL can sometimes handicap students, right? So there needs to be a continuous push out of the programming. My younger brother was swept into the ESL support system, which he did not need. He is born here west side of Columbus. And I believe that for many students, that can be the case. And I think it's so important to, I would say, continuously check on the curriculum and the progress of students, because that programming sometimes can have the ability to scaffold student progress, right? Because we want to get them fully immersed in the curriculum that we're providing them, right?
Yes.
So that's just my tidbit. Thank you for your presentation. Yes. I do believe we need to move more towards the ELL,
yes,
English learners, yes, because it's more comprehensive,
yes.
you know,
Yes,
and then also really continuing to really educate our teachers, all teachers, on curriculum that is, I would say, culturally inclusive. And I believe that what you said, the constant collaboration of our general ed teachers, our special ed teachers, our ESL, ELL teachers needs to be a continuous conversation to be able to provide the most equitable and culturally competent curriculum.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
thank you so much tonight.
Yes, ma'am. And if I may, and you are absolutely right, the EL and the ESL, I usually refer to our ES as the ESL department,
Yes.
and our students as EL or ELL.
Yes, I saw it mentioned. It's mentioned in here.
Yeah.
I said ESL, but if you look through the things, you do say EL.
Yes,
so I
yes.
do appreciate that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and then the last thing is that you are absolutely, it's another point that we have to tighten up on, is that coming through central enrollment, it's a home language survey that has a series of questions, okay? Because when you talk about, sometimes they get misidentified.
Yes.
And if they're actually born here. But one of the questions on the home language survey is that, was a family member born outside of the country?
Yeah.
It's different, that triggers that check mark for LEP status.
Yeah.
See, so that's something that I think, and I'm gonna check back with the state, because I think we can change that home language survey at least to say what we want those questions to be, what we want, or at least have them make sure we double check that to say, hey, wait a minute, you know, maybe this student doesn't have to be identified as an English learner right off the bat. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Thank you for that. I think specifying that, because a lot of our students speak multiple languages in our household. Like I
Yes.
do too. I speak spoken Somali and Arabic. Wallahi, that's what I do. But I think
You need a
maybe
job?
having
You need a job? I got a spot. No, I'm just-
no, but I think highlighting that and being more specific in that survey to really, really get I will get more accurate numbers of our actual EL students in the household. So thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Can I just ask about that, because that's new information. Do you think that the purpose of that is, one, to identify students, but, we're having a challenge with it maybe being done where the student doesn't need the service, but maybe it's the family or the communication with the family. That's really where the services are. And so, and I know that we do a lot of support with
Yes.
family engagement and all of that. And so maybe it's just a different, or we word it
A different
differently,
approach on-
to make
yeah.
sure we are also supporting the
Yes.
family.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, absolutely.
Thank you all. I just have a few questions, and we'll move on to the next presentation. The first is, if we go to page 7, where we're looking comparatively at ourselves, Akron, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Dayton. What is it that accounts for some of those differences? It looks like in some instances we're sharing the same point designation, particularly with Akron, Dayton, and even Cleveland over the average 3 years. But what accounts for the differences, you think, between us and them, where in one particular year, maybe they're looking a little better than what we are?
Well, I can tell you, just right off the top, is that we get twice the number of true newcomers that will come into their district that are truly newcomers.
Got
okay?
you.
So that's the first thing. And now, when we say the 5 points there, when we take a look at the 5 points, the state target is established for the state exam every year, okay? And to be quite honest, like, for example, Akron with the 1,310 ELs, that's probably gonna be a lot easier to get those students additional support that they might need for the OL, but the state exam, than it would be for us and our 5,000. I mean, and our teachers do a great job. It's just, I think their numbers dictate that a little bit better for them, or makes it a little bit easier for them to hit that state target than it would be for us, because we get twice, probably 3 times the number of true newcomers that have never been to school maybe that need that additional support.
Okay, wonderful. So then that's the size aspect. When we go down to page 11 with the regional look, and Region 5, if I'm interpreting this correctly in your interim space, is this something that qualifies that Region 5 is actually doing really well in this space? And if so, what is accounting for that?
At the Region 5, it's that we have our flagship. Up there we have like the Northland and the Beechcroft. And from the administration down, the ESL teachers there are seasoned. They've been there. In Regions 4 and 5, those where the most of our seasoned ESL teachers been with us a long time. And Northland, with being our flagship ESL site start way back in the day, they got it running. It's a machine. From the time the students come in to ESL, through the movement from the ESL teacher through the general education and out to graduation. So it's a number of factors in there, but if I had just to be honest, in my opinion, it's just the operation that they have at that particular site in 4 and 5, and that's where the majority of our sites, when they first got established years ago, was, and that's where the majority of our seasoned teachers are, and seasoned IAs also.
Got you. Okay, so if we include the culture and climate aspect of this in terms of mindset that you talked about just a bit earlier, how does that play? Does that, any of this play? Because if I look at all the numbers, I mean, they look pretty doggone good. I mean, even as I'm looking at the needs ESL versus the interim, I mean, as I'm looking at some of these numbers they look good, but mindset-wise, what do you think is accounting? Do you think there's any accounting in that space for the performance aspect?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the mindset from the top down, administrator to the teacher. I think that's the mindset. The mindset is that they have at Northland, if the capacity is 800, 900 students, whatever they have there, they got 900 students. And we don't have so many, they count those ESL students, they're students. And the Gen Ed students, the teachers have, the buy-in is there that I know I'm going to have English learners into my classroom. And the key there, the key, President Cole, is that the collaboration at those sites, at the Northlands, at all of our high schools, really, and it's not that it's not anywhere else, but the collaboration there at those locations is really, really good, very good, between the Gen Ed teachers and the ESL teachers. They collaborate with each other. It's a constant conversation about, well, this student is moving forward. They actually have it so the students can sometimes move even in a 9-week period. You see, so that's the collaboration. That's what I'm talking about. That's the mindset you have to have as a teacher from the administration, and that goes from the top down, from the Gen Ed teacher to the ESL teacher and back and forth. You have to have that mindset and be able to have that conversation. I got these 3 students here. They're doing just fine. I got to get them. I got to move them out. We got to keep this moving. It's the mindset.
All right. And then my last question is along the realignment aspect of things. I love where you started off about what does the experience look like. What can realignment look like in this space? As I'm looking at your last couple of columns here on page 11 with teach and IAs, and then I'm, comparing or putting that right next to what you're saying is what you'd like to see ideally occur with the increase of IAs. It's very clear that they play a significant role in the success of this program in any given region. It seems as if there are certain regions that have a greater influx of students than others that also have the resources available to serve them. How do we uplift ESL, ELL to the space of incorporating them into this realignment process in a way that we're looking at filling school buildings, in a way that we're looking at having matching curriculum that otherwise they can leverage and use, where we can cultivate mindset? How do we look at this realignment process and really have you guys kind of elevate that for us in this process as well? Am I asking this question right? Sometimes I have to ask myself, am I saying this right?
I might ask for a little support on that one, because I think I have an idea, but
So this is really why we talk about service delivery and the importance of ensuring that we are providing a continuum of service for English learners, for students with IEPs, for students to have the opportunity to participate in advanced placement, college credit plus. Part of the challenge when we have so many schools that do not have a full enrollment is that we're limited by staff. That we often don't have enough staff in a particular school to provide the whole continuum of service because staffing is very much driven by enrollment in the numbers of students in a school. And so what we will look at very carefully, be very thoughtful about in realignment is ensuring that we think first about our most vulnerable students and how to serve students in a way that we have enough students in the school to drive enough staff to that school so that we can provide the continuum of service. But as Mr. Singh indicated, there are schools where maybe there are only 5, 8 students in the school who need English learner service. And perhaps the family has refused service because they want to keep their other, and maybe there's a student who in the family who doesn't need the service or needs other services. And so certainly a part of realignment is, it is largely to provide the academic experience that our students deserve. And what I would say is, even though there may be just 5 students in a school and Mr. Sain's coordinators coordinate with the principal and the teachers in those schools, the fact is those 5 students deserve the services that they require. And yet we are challenged when our enrollment is low and we can't afford to provide all of those services in all of our buildings.
Well, here's the thing, and then I'll let it go. When I'm looking at this particular page in data, I'm looking at it from an asset type of mindset. I'm actually looking at it and mapping from an asset perspective, where you're saying that regions 1, 2, 4, and 5 actually have the demonstrated ability to not only accommodate these types of students, but also provide them the resources that they need to be able to transition out of that system, right? That we're able to actually progress them towards general population of students successfully. Then we're looking at, from that standpoint, now we're looking at the number of buildings. Now we're looking at enrollment or under-enrollment in those spaces. And I think, I'm just trying to throw it out there, I think that this is just another great way of identifying where our assets are, where students seem to be combining the most in population, where we have very clearly the greatest space of human capital providing supports to kids. This is possibly where we can be thinking about how realignment can work with this particular enclave of kids, this particular community of students. Am I making sense, or am I just, and I know everybody, I know this is albeit this is a safe space, it is. Nobody here is trying to put the administration or the superintendent into a trick bag of making commitments. That's not what we're doing. But I do want this to be this kind of environment where we can really think this through and some some pragmatic kinds of ways, not making commitments, but just helping us process it and think it through. That's all. But Mr. Sane, did you have a thought before we move on?
No, sir. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Appreciate you having me.
All right. Thank you all for this presentation. Yes.
I'm sorry, I have one more question, and I know we're running very short on time, but when we go back to that chart with the ELs in by grade, you mentioned that the 9th grade, when newcomers or when students are placed there, they kind of start in 9th grade just automatically. So if we have a newcomer, for example, who is 17 years old and is placed in 9th grade, number one, they still must meet all graduation requirements, right? Tell me about their experience and what that looks like.
Yeah, that's very difficult. And what we do is, for a student that comes to us at that age, and let's just be honest, we haven't had much success for those students who have come to us at that age and then getting through a 4-year cohort with the credits. What we do is that we sit down with that family. I have people at Central Enrollment then let me know we had that situation. We then have a serious conversation with that family. I usually take myself or Myra, we'll have a conversation with that family and says, hey, let's be honest here. Your student's gonna struggle. Then we'll introduce the assets of our adult education program.
Thank you. Okay.
So we start to have that serious conversation because a lot of our students come to us because what will happen is, the data shows it, they come to us at that age, and even if they enroll, a lot of times they're absent because they're working. So we just go ahead and have, right off the bat, we're not saying that you have to leave or nothing, we don't want to do that. We just say, here's a pathway for you, and this is what we suggest. And usually what happens, if they don't take it right away, they'll come back to us a little bit later and say, yeah, you were right, give me the address, and then I hook them up with the adult education program with Ed O'Reilly. And we go their pathway. And that usually works out. But that's a tough situation for them to be in at that age, but you just can't do it. And then, of course, we can't start them any lower than that because you can't have a 17-year-old in middle school or. Correct. See, so we have a serious conversation about the adult program.
So it's a compulsory age pathway.
Yeah. Yes.
It's a compulsory age pathway up to 21, right? It's leveraging either giving them the opportunity to get into the adult programming or pathway them in a way that we can use other resources if they're demonstrating the growth.
Yes.
The other resources would be the online piece, correct? Are we leveraging that as well?
Yes, and also I make sure out of the department, every summer when we have those situations, we run a list of students that are older, that are short credits that we can get through with summer graduation, and also in that particular age range where we know it's gonna be struggle, we refer them to, I have a teacher that does that, to do the credits, and if they're serious about it, we'll know right off, really quick, that this student is serious, that they'll work over the summer, because we've had a couple that works over the summer to catch up on the credits and replace those things that they've missed or at an age where they probably are not going to be able to catch up with it in the classroom. So we use that option also, online and the summer work that we do. We provide a couple teachers there with our department funds to make sure that they have that available.
In closing question, I don't want to make up something, but does this in part account for the 5-year cohort success? Is this some way contributed to that or no?
Yeah, actually it does. I mean, because what happens is that 5-year students, we have a lot of students that'll get right there to the edge and they just don't have time. That 5-year cohort, we give them that extra year with the support that we provide with the summer and the online academy to catch up, then they'll end up being in that 5-year cohort.
Again, so if I'm asset mapping, and I even said this at the board table, I was like, we have competitive advantage here. We've got the 4-year. We've got that traditional timeline. And I think if we can work with certain families to do away with the stigma. So when you've got College Credit Plus, you've got CTE, you've got a 4-year and a 5-year cohort. Why are we bugging? Forgive me for using that colloquialism. Why are we tripping out and stigmatizing a 5-year cohort? Why are we doing that when we actually have the ability to be incredibly flexible and still transition people through high school successfully? I just want us to just keep that in mind. I really want to uplift that mindset of, let's think of this from an asset kind of component. Sorry. and figure out exactly how it is that we transition kids in the best ways we possibly can. And it's a realignment process. In this realignment process, we might even be able to use some of these buildings even more effectively. So I'll leave it at that. I apologize, y'all. Thank you so much for this presentation. This has been an awesome conversation. We'll move on to our positive behavior intervention systems conversation and presentation. Welcome, everybody. Thank you again, Mr. Sane.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And also, Ms. Mosier. See, I still want to call you doctor.
Good evening, President Cole and committee members and guests. I am Tyree Rivers.
And my name is Bridget Lowry.
And today, the purpose of our presentation, we're both climate and culture systems consultants, pardon me, but the purpose of our presentation today is just to provide you with an overview of some of the insights of our work in regards to climate and culture. So we're going to start by defining what PBIS is. Then we're going to see why does it even matter and why do we even want to do it? And then how do we measure the fidelity of PBIS implementation? And then the last step is looking at some of our accomplishments, our state recognition, and then we're also going to consider some next steps. But before I move to the next slide, I just want y'all to think of this for a moment, because PBIS exists everywhere in our lives outside of a school setting. So imagine that you're boarding a plane and you sit down on a plane. Before you take off, some crucial things happen. Typically, and the captain comes on, he gives an announcement, right? Then we have flight attendants. The flight attendants instruct, they might walk through the aisles and they'll start closing all of the overhead luggage. Why? To protect our heads from being hit by it. Then the next thing they'll do is they'll go over some expectations of how do you buckle your seatbelt? Then you'll see some signage that lights up that says, when this is on, you keep it closed. When this is off, you're free to walk around. They set what that expectation is. Then in case of danger, they show you where the exits clearly are throughout all parts of the airplane. And then you take off. But then there's a caveat. There might be some issues that happen on the plane, and you might have experienced this. Someone might be having a disruption. You'll see several people come out, including the captain, and the captain to have a conversation with the passenger to say, is this going to be a safe ride for you? What do I need to give to you? And a flight attendant to help assist too. Can you agree to XYZ before we take off? If you cannot agree to XYZ before we take off, then we're going to have to escort you off the plane. And the person gets the decision to make a choice, but they have an expectation of what behavior looks like on a plane. Why? Because they want a safe, pleasant ride for all of their passengers. Same thing with PBIS. So when you think about PBIS, take a moment and look at the definition that we have here, and I'll let you read it. So key things there, and thank you for reading that. One, it's a tiered framework. It's a framework that is consistently used throughout all of the schools within our district and at the district level to guide the work within our office. And then there's something like that airplane experience, common expectations, common language, common practice. And that helps to create predictable, safe environments in our classroom and in our schools where teachers feel safe to teach and students can enjoy a learning environment where they feel safe, brave, and smart.
Why PBIS, can I switch with you?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Why PBIS matters. PBIS helps to create safe environments where students and staff feel included, provides physical and emotional safety, and ensures everyone feels valued and supported, builds positive relationships and school climate, strengthens connections through positive reinforcement, and fosters respect and engagement. And it also establishes predictable routines, clear expectations, teaches behaviors and, for instance, like academic skills, reduces disruptions, and builds and supports student success. So consider our tiered approach, the 3-tiered triangle. In a typical classroom of 30 students, Tier 1 supports will meet the needs of about 20 students, 20 to 22 students in a classroom. However, we can expect about 4 to 5 students needing additional support, targeted supports, such as check-in, check-out, and about 2 to 3 students may require more intensive supports, often provided in collaboration with our community partners. PBIS emphasizes the importance, like Tyree said, of common language, consistent practices to support those positive relationships between staff and students, which is so important, and creating these supportive and collaborative environments. PBIS helps to increase student engagement in learning and in school activities, boosting attendance and academic performance. Emphasizes teaching and reinforcing positive behaviors rather than solely addressing negative behaviors. Reduces the number of students with student discipline referrals, therefore creating supportive and collaborative environments.
In a way that we measure PBIS is with the Tier Fidelity Inventory. The Tier Fidelity Inventory is a structured team assessment. So teams actually assess their fidelity at each tier, Tier 1, Tier 2, and we also have a Tier 3, which they've actually started for this school year. But this helps schools to look at how is their implementation. Is it measuring up to whatever their fidelity measures are, which should be about 70% for each tier. And then after that, schools can actually create action plans for how to respond to the data. So here you can see on the screen here with the data, we have our TFI summary with the results for an average across all of our schools. And it's increased each year. So we've gone from 53% in 2017 when this was initially rolled out to our schools to now 91%. So that means when you go into a majority of our schools, they're going to have the expectations there with PBIS. They're going to have a team. They're going to have 3 to 5 school-wide expectations that you can see. They're going to have things such as a formalized, structured system that they can go in and tweak and match the needs of their climate and culture, meaning the people that they serve, their students, their staff, and the families. And one last thing about the TFI, it is scored annually in the spring of each year.
So PBIS state recognition is really a way for schools to be recognized with their PBIS level of implementation. And the recognition levels range from bronze to gold. These levels acknowledge schools and the districts for their commitment and success in implementing PBIS practices, emphasizing data-driven decision-making and student behavior. So schools who score a 70% or higher on Tier 1 implementation are eligible to apply for recognition. Schools who score 70% or higher on Tier 2, Tier 1 and Tier 2 are eligible for applying for silver recognition. And therefore, schools who score 70% on all 3 tiers, Tier 1, 2, and 3, are eligible to apply for statewide recognition. Let me advance that, thank you. So our data shows, as you can see, starting back in 2017, when our schools initially were applying for recognition, we had 1 school that was eligible and received silver recognition, and then 3 schools were recognized for bronze. So our data is steadily increasing over the years, reflecting in our commitment to PBIS implementation. So, and just another positive highlight of our district, since 2019, Columbus City Schools has received the district award. We've been honored with that for our commitment at the district level for implementing PBIS. So during the school year of 23-24, a total number of 69 elementary, middle, and high schools have been awarded with PBIS recognition.
And one thing to point out with this application, schools had to provide evidence to the state. So they had to upload evidence to show their implementation within the schools for the tiers that they've actually done this work, and they have proof documenting the impact of that work too. So supports provided to the district school, or to the school team, excuse me, are in the form from the Climate and Culture, from the Office of Whole Child's, and supports. I forgot about that. But it is the Climate and Culture Systems Consultants. There are 9 consultants, 6 support 3 of the regions, and 3 work at the district level. But our roles are coaching, consultation, and facilitation. So with coaching, we're really getting in there and working with our schools, teams. So we're making sure that their systems are formalized. It can't be a myth. That's what we're saying. It can't be word of mouth. This is how we function. This is how we work here. It has to be written and documented. So that's in their staff handbook. That's in their student handbook. This is how we respond to discipline in a proactive way within our schools. So it's formalized. Then we monitor it. Then we revise it. And then we actually put some practices in place. The coordinators, too, at the school levels actually attend quarterly meetings provided by our office. In consultation, we look at what is a school administrators planning for the school year in regards to behavior and how to respond to it and how to equip staff and build their toolkit around it. So we look at staff development. We look at we have a planning calendar. There's also family engagement, how we engage in families and informing families of what our expectations are and how they can ask for and request help within that system. And then we have data-driven conversations. So what is our data saying and how does it drive us to monitor and tweak our PBIS implementation? Then for facilitation, we provide professional learning sessions and professional workshops specifically around PBIS, restorative practices, trauma-informed practices, and social-emotional learning. However, it's not limited to those, but these are the main ones that we all do address. And for our next steps, things that we would like to continue is we wanted to ensure the effectiveness of PBIS, and we will provide and prioritize sustainability, meaning that we don't want to make any mistakes and go back. So we want to continue the trajectory that we're having in all of our schools by making sure focusing on Tier 2 and Tier 3 PBIS to enhance our overall multi-tier systems of support. We also want to continue to work collaboratively with our buildings by providing our coordinators with coaching and training. So our quarterly meetings will continue, and then we'll also have meetings subset that may be more targeted and focused for specific schools. And then we'll continue fostering and maintaining our collaborative relationships with our community partners so that we are working to support the whole child. And there's the African proverb, it takes a village. We can't do it by ourselves. Our schools go to after-school programs at the Boys and Girls Club. We work with them. We teach them what we're doing in the schools so that they have a common language. City years in our schools. We teach them what are our PBI expectations. How can you engage with our framework? So they're working right alongside with us, and their invaluable support is appreciated. And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you so much.
Wow. Ms. Rivers, Ms. Lowry, thank you so much for this presentation. The floor is open. Anyone? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for your presentation on PBIS. I am a big fan of PBIS. I've taught for 10 years. I'm a former school counselor, and I believe in PBIS. You know, extrinsic motivation. I've also worked in the tiered levels. So one thing I'm kind of shocked about is communities and schools. I've worked at communities and schools. They have at that same tiered process. When working in the district as a community schools coordinator, we work with 20% of the school population, right? And then we have our Tier 2, which are small groups, which we do outsourcing with other additional community resources. And then Tier 1 are those one-on-one supports, right? Those one-on-one interventions, right? To assist with student behavior. I was kind of shocked that they weren't mentioned. There are nationally, they are across, and also in Columbus City Schools. Have you guys thought about extending, more help or support from that particular organization? I know they have a record-breaking success with a lot of their partnerships with Columbus City and other districts throughout the state as well. So I want to know if that was something y'all hope to plan on expanding along with Boys and Girls Club and City Year. Is that something that you guys are thinking about? Or I know we're already in the schools, so.
They're already in some of our buildings.
Yeah.
We just named a few partnerships.
Okay.
We could be here for another
Yeah.
hour, quite
Yeah.
frankly, if we listed all of our community partnerships, the collaborations that we have across the district.
Right.
We just wanted to highlight a few.
Got you.
Yes.
Got you. Okay. I just had to check to make sure because I was like, I was in Columbus City Schools doing that same process because I wholeheartedly believe in it. So thank you so much for presenting and correcting me that that you guys are. Okay.
Well, they're here deep. In fact, they did a
Okay.
presentation for this committee.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I was making sure. I was like, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I have some questions.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I want to, if we can go back to the slide that it is showcasing the over time, the amount of winners, the gold, silver, bronze. Just again, congratulating all of our schools. You know, from 2017, 4% of our schools are represented in those numbers. Up to 2024, where 62% of our schools are represented, which is pretty amazing over that period of time. So congratulations to all the schools and the staff. So now that I've said that, I'm going to ask you about the golds, and I'm going to ask you about why is it that we in 2022 had 8 golds and we kind of came down on that? And I'm also kind of maybe in that answer wondering if it's the same schools that are getting recognized each year, or are these different schools? So is it really more schools than what I just said, who in the course of this time period might have had, you know, maybe in 2022 they were up there, but they're not in 23, or like how consistent are these schools in each of the years?
I'm going to give an example of one school that's probably like a flagship school with PBIS and Achieving Gold, Georgian Heights. They have sustained gold over several years, and there are other schools that are in that same process too. But one of the things that stands out about them is that they consistently have ways to measure that practice and that sustainability piece. Remember, it has to be formal and written. It has to be looked at through their TFI, that annual assessment, and tweaked and adjusted. And sometimes it can be intimidating for schools to gather all of their evidence and put it in and compile it and go back and look at it. To me, I think our schools are doing a great job at Tier 3. I think that's probably one of our highest things there. But it's like, how do I sit down, gather all that information together, and take the time, because it is a time-consuming process with this particular model of the showcase, to compile all of that evidence, provided with the support of a climate and culture system consultant or a member from the state support team. So it takes time and commitment and the desire to actually want to apply. So I would encourage all of our schools to apply for a PBIS award at any level, because they're all doing some amazing work. Gotcha. And especially at the Tier 1, that Tier 1 is crucial to have those expectations set. And majority of them have it. It's just walking through the process and going through it, which can be intimidating for some schools.
Gotcha. So for those schools that are reaching the gold level, thank you for that explanation, because it might be a paperwork barrier, and that's not, and so really it could be more schools up here, truthfully. But those that are up here at the gold level, what is it in the academic program or in the organizational structure that is allowing these schools to sustain over time? Is it a building principle? Is it the way they have PBIS structured in terms of having a couple teachers that are over it, or counselors? Like what's the best practice there?
It goes back to it takes a village, led by their building principal. Their building principal has to be 100% invested and involved, but then also empowering their committee, their PBIS committee, to advance and do the work. So you will have a behavior expertise person, you'll have an academic person, you'll have a family member, sometimes students represented on that team, and then you'll have another staff member. And these staff members can range from my cafeteria person to a school counselor, school social worker, school nurse, classroom teacher, but people who are willing to get in there and do the work, but also be champions to do the work throughout their building. So that means they have to believe in the system, they have to teach the system. So it goes back to that common practice, that consistent application. It's so that the students are having that common experience to experience a warm and welcoming, safe environment where, again, teaching and learning can happen. But it takes everybody to be involved in supporting that, whether you're a team member or whether you're a staff member supporting it. But it has to be adult-facing, and you have to actually implement it and use it. And be willing to educate anybody that comes into your building on what that actually means. So sitting down, having an orientation with them. If you're going to be working in my building and working with my students, this is what this looks like here. And here's what the expectations are. Use the signage that you see around the building, so because there is signage that says, how does behavior look here in the classroom? How does it look in the auditorium? How does it look in the office? So educating everyone so that they're on the same page and equipped with the same knowledge.
I have two quick questions more. So you just gave a list of the expectations of where does it look, where does it look? Is our transportation, like the bus, is
Great
that
question.
tied in?
We've actually been working, a member of our team who works at the district level, Ms. Chaka Job, has actually been working tirelessly with the transportation office. And they've actually updated, as of last year, some of the behavioral expectations for what behavior looks like on the bus, what it should look like, what it should sound like, versus the list of 20 do not do's. Like, students know what not to do, but what do you do to have a safe bus ride, to be transported safely home, into school, and then back, vice versa. So they've actually worked to revise what those bus expectations look like. And that we've actually been with the bus aides and worked with transportation to provide professional development. The staff has actually given some input, like what should we have as our expectations and what behaviors do we want to see? So the staff, they've been at professional developments and been contributors and engaged with this work. So yes, we do have some work going on there.
Excited.
And they're excited.
Your
They're
example
excited.
of the airplane just like made me think of that.
Yes.
So my next question, and I'm gonna try really hard not to put my chair hat on for ETRM to talk about like resources and money, but I think it's important when you go to the last slide where you have your next steps and you list just a few of our partners there. We know that some of these partners that are actually on this slide are also facing issues with budgets, and I'm wondering if, what is the impact if they are not able to provide the type of services that they have had in the past, to our outcomes in this space, and what additional resources or ways can we as the board, through our board work, help PBIS, making sure to, either pick up some of this or try to overcome some of it, to ensure that we continue to have the success we do.
And I'll be honest, I probably have a lot of ideas running through my mind. But in fairness to my team, like, we would have to sit down and really discuss that as a team. So that is not a Tyree and Bridget show, but have their voices included in that conversation, and also to bring in some of our community partners so that we are talking with them too, so that they're engaged in the conversation. So I think it's more than us just saying this is what it needs to be. I think it's a collaborative conversation across various stakeholders to ensure the sustainability of PBIS.
And that's fair. Maybe we'll have you on agenda item at the ETRM committee to talk more about that.
Oh, sorry, Danita.
You have another meeting to go to.
Yes, ma'am.
I have to jump in on that one. To say that this work and that our students and our staff would be negatively impacted if there is any interruption in state or federal funding to support supplemental programs, including those provided by partners on this slide and the many, many, many others. Thank you for giving me a chance to talk about this. We have schools that are currently looking at how to supplement services through partnerships such as those on the screen, but I'm going to talk specifically about communities and schools. We have schools that this year are using Title I and non-competitive school improvement funds. That's how we fund the supplementary supports that you see when you see our Communities and Schools liaison at Mifflin High School, at West High School, at other programs, at other school sites. We are able to do that currently because of the state and federal funds that we receive. If there is any delay, any interruption, any reduction in those funds coming into the district as planned and projected, our partnerships would absolutely be at risk, and our students would not receive the additional supplementary services that they need.
Thank you for citing that. I think that the listening community who is watching this meeting need to hear that. We started today's meeting with the idea that cuts from the state are extraordinarily real in their impact to a classroom environment and to every other environment in a school district that includes our transportation. So thank you for uplifting that. I have a quick question if there wasn't any additional. My question is you talked about evidence-based, that what you report to the state of Ohio has to have a measure of evidence in it. You mentioned discipline as a part of that. What are we seeing as a result of not just getting these awards? And to me, that is a great adult, outcome. But what are we seeing in terms of are there any decreases that we're seeing in discipline issues with students? Like, what is the impact that's taking place as a result of this?
I think with some of the initiatives that we do have, there has been some positive trajectory. Just speaking about the PEAK program, it's the Positive Efforts for Adjustment and Knowledge program in elementary schools. Just the way they utilize it is a little bit differently now. So you might have students be referred to PEAK who are not regulated just for a brain break. So recognizing that this is not a behavior problem, the student just needs a break. They need to step away from the classroom, maybe regroup themselves, just like we would if we were adult. I need to say, Bridget, I need to tap out for a second so I can get myself together, and then I can have a conversation with a caring adult and return back to the classroom. So you'll see a decrease in regards to PEAK referrals for behavioral problems because they're utilizing the resource a little bit differently to make sure that they're being responsive to the social emotional needs of our students. So there have been some positive changes, and we can look and definitely get you some exact numbers in regards to the actual increases and decreases.
I think that'll be helpful. I think it'll be tremendously helpful too, in terms of how we, again, in that asset mapping mindset, how do we actually dispel myths about this school district? We had a student that spoke at our event yesterday that was absolutely incredible, but I'm not surprised. At the same time, I'm not surprised. Maybe I'm a little too close to our work and to what we all do, but I'm not surprised. But I said even at that event that this youngster came up and dispelled myth about, the lack of what our kids are able to achieve and do. So I thank you for this. Are there any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you all so much for this report, and congratulations again. Let's keep up the good work.
Thank you.
All right. With that in mind, I am going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. If there's no objection, no abstention. We will go ahead and accept that.